Well, hello.
Hi
Um,
Laura, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm
Uh,
okay, yeah. I'm just about managing.
just about, just about.
Just about.
Um, so, thank you for joining us, other people. This is a bit of an unusual way to do an interview for public consumption. But a lot of people will know you, Will, as an author of Guitar Man, Ballad of Britain, This House is Full of Yogis. They might know you from presenting Songbook on Sky Arts. But a lot of people will know you as the chief music critic for The Times. So normally your working week would be quite different than I imagine it has been for the past few months. You would normally be out at, how many gigs a week would you be at approximately?
I would be out at 3 to 4 gigs a week.
Mm-hmm.
And my working week would be going into, I rent an office. I'd get in there about 10 o'clock. I'd work all day,
Mm-hmm.
probably not come home before. Um, and then I'd be out at a gig and I'd get home about midnight. And then the following morning, I'd be writing up the review of the gig at home.
Mm-hmm.
So sort of from from 7:30. So a massive part of my job has gone, but also part of my life. I mean, as much as I complain about going to see, Justin Bieber at the Birmingham NEC on a Sunday night, which is, a highly unsuitable for a man of my age, and b not very pleasant. It's life, it's experience, it's people. You know what I mean? It's music, and this is what I realised about my job, which has really brought home that it's not just the gig, it's not just the the person on stage who you clap at the end. It's the fact that you're surrounded by people. It's a night out. There's interaction. There's the way people look. There's the way people act. There's getting there. There's the whole rigmarole of the place. All of that stuff. There's the dreadlock sound guy with Bo kind of flailing about the place. All of those things I'm missing terribly. If I'm going to be honest with you, so many times I thought I really, really don't want to go out tonight, and now, of course, that it's been taken away from me. I really, really miss it.
I think it's easy if you are a music critic, and I'm also one, to get quite blasé about going to a gig, and it's important to check in a little bit and remind yourself of the excitement that you once felt when you had to pay for tickets, when you had to queue with everybody else, not slip in the guest list, but also how you would prepare for a gig. Count down the days. I, as a young woman, would think long and hard about what I was going to wear to a gig. I wish I still had that consideration now. I don't. I just rock whatever. But those are the things. It's very easy to forget, aren't they? But for so many people in an audience at any show, whether that's Justin Bieber in an arena, or whether that's I don't know, a teenager sneaking in under the licensing laws to go to a scrotty gig somewhere in I don't know, the Dublin Castle. That's what gigs is important not to forget, I guess.
Do you remember? Yeah, think about when you were 15 or 16, and you had discovered some kind of underground band, or like something that all the kids at school didn't really know about.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you remember how exciting it was to go there and look at all the people there and just wonder about whether they had parents? Do you know what I mean? Whether they had normal homes?
Yeah,
Because they're so cool and they're so exciting. They surely they don't have parents like me. They don't have boring homes to go back to.
I used to.
That's the kind of So I'm interested. What did you think about all that world?
Oh my god, it was simultaneously exciting and thrilling, but also deeply intimidating, and a language I didn't quite know how to speak. Now from my great age, I look back and I think no one really knew how to speak the language. But I used to be so nervous about how I even stood in a crowd of people, which is probably why even to this day I become the corridor in a crowd. I'm still the person that people push past. But yeah, it was such an important part of growing up, having a band that was your band, and that you knew all the songs and the stories behind a lot of the songs, and to be in a room full of people who felt something similar about that band was extraordinary.
Completely, and also the venue. I mean, I used to go to this place when I was 14. First time I went there, they wouldn't let me in. And then I went with my older brother and kind of just sort of hid under his shadows and sneaked in. It's called the Clarendon in Hammersmith. And it was so incredibly exciting for me. You know, things like, you know, I came from suburbia, and then suddenly you're in this place where the toilet door is hanging off its hinges, the bar staff are rude and surly, everybody's smoking as they did then, people look exotic and weird. It was all so exciting. And, you know, so yes, it is definitely the band, but it's also the culture, which I found so exciting. And that's something which I've realized when it's been the last few months where it's been taken away, is that these kind of shabby, often slightly out of the way places have a very important role in British culture, but it's not really celebrated. I mean, it is to an extent, but it's not, you know, it's not like, it's not celebrated in the way that, you know, you're not going to, I don't know, like it's different at the South Bank or the Barbican or, you know, the Sage Gateshead or anything. It's, you know, as great as those places are, we're talking about the kind of the grotty, grimy little venues, those places. I think it's because when you, especially when you're 16, 17, 18, it seems like anything's possible. So although I can completely hear you when you say they're intimidating and you're sort of wondering where to stand and all the rest of it, it's also massively exciting.
Oh yeah, and you feel as if you found your people.
Yeah.
I could say that the reason we are talking today, in fact, is that we are celebrating these these venues.
These grimy places.
Yes, let me hold it up. It is Roof Dog, which is a celebration of Brixton Windmill, which Will has written for Rough Trade Books. And the illustrations are by your son Otto, who is, right. He's at Camberwell, right, studying art?
He's just gone, yeah, he's 19 now. Okay. So he was a windmill regular.
So, so he's provided all these beautiful sounds really rubbish, a rubbish word to use, but amazing illustrations in here. One of the things I really love about this book is the fact that it's about a relationship with a venue. It's about your relationship with venues in general, and the Clarendon specifically. There's a lot about the Clarendon, but it's also about Otto and his relationship with the windmill, and a very particular intersection of your lives, and that you are a music critic. You would have to go to the windmill, I would imagine, to see bands, or often go. And Otto's there as well. There's a brilliant section where you're talking about where you're going to a gig or a Christmas party, I think it is, at the windmill, and you're walking there, and Otto's very nervous that you're going to want to hang out with him.
He gives me a very specific set of instructions. It's like, you know, because obviously also this is a situation which I could never have in a million years with my dad. You know, the thought of going to see the Jesus and Mary Chain with my father is horrific, you know. But, you know, to go and see, I think we're going to see Black Midi and Black Country New Road. And, you know, first of all, I'm getting him in for free. So he is aware of that. But at the same time, he's then an 18-year-old. And on the way there, I think he said, oh yeah, Dad, is it all right if when we get in, you you know, you find some people you know to talk about, and you just kind of maybe pretend you don't know me? It's like, yeah, fine, whatever. The funny thing is that we went to see Dama Suzuki, you know, the old lead singer of Can. Now Dama Suzuki is in his 70s. So the audience there's lots of old gits. And actually, all age groups. It was kind of cool. There were people in their early 20s who discovered Can, people in their 30s, right up to their 70s. It was a real mix. When we went there, none of his friends were there, and he was kind of fine then with hanging out because it was a complete all ages and thing. But when we went to the Christmas party, he was very young, and there are lots of people he knew. That's when I had to pretend I didn't exist. So it was interesting. It got me thinking about rock and roll in a way, rock music, and the fact that I've loved this, and in a way I haven't grown up because it's something I discovered in my adolescence. It's never really left me. I don't just mean rock music. I mean soul, funk, you know, all kinds of music, what you'd call popular music as opposed to classical. And the culture now is such that, you know, we can all go to festivals, we can all enjoy this, it's kind of not so age specific as this thing once was. If you go back to the 1950s, it was seen as this teenage fad, and here we are 60 years later, and the teenage fad is now spread throughout our generations and means a lot to people, and it's a great form of expression. And the live music aspect is not just a form of expression, but a form of living. So the idea of being in this place which is underground, off the beaten track, with my son, was something which I didn't have any preparation for, and it was only happened now. So obviously it's not going to happen in 10 years' time, because then I really will be too old. It couldn't have happened 10 years ago because he was too young. So we're just at this kind of period, sort of, you could call it a golden period or a terrible period, depending on your outlook. Father and son can theoretically go to gigs together as long as they pretend not to know each other.
And he's been quite secretive, hasn't he, as well, about things that happen at the Windmill that he knows about that you don't know about?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Windmill is an interesting one because it's this flat roof pub. It used to be an Irish pub. It's a flat roof council estate pub built for the adjoining estate. They've got a kind of the image of flat roof pubs in Britain is rough, dangerous, no-go areas, which is not true at all of the Windmill. It's super friendly. And it's become a kind of underground place because Tim Perry, the booker, is so good at finding what's going on, and he's got great ears. He's really interested in unusual music, so he's always looking at the new. So you go there, and you kind of, you're in this place where you can go by the bar, and you could be like a 75-year-old Irishman, or a middle-aged music journalist, and that's completely fine. When you go to the back garden, you were saying you felt intimidated when you were 16. I feel intimidated now because they're 16,
yeah,
and they're all, they're all, well, they're not getting up to too much, but they're getting up to certain things, I think.
They're thinking about it, I would say that much.
I'm sorry?
They're thinking about it at the very least.
They're definitely thinking about it at the very least, and they're definitely checking each other out. And there's a whole series of codes that are going on that it doesn't apply after a certain age, does it? So so he's probably part of a kind of a language, let's say, that I'm not privy to.
Give us a little bit more description of the Windmill specifically, because you do it beautifully in the book.
Thank you very much. So it's from the outside, it looks a little bit like one of those, I think it's called a hydrogen bomb, which leaves the building standing but kills everybody around. It sort of looks like it survived a hydrogen bomb. It does look quite tatty, let's say, to put it politely. But when you go inside, it's really nice. There's a Camberwell art student called Kimia Amini, and she asked Seamus, the landlord, if she could paint the inside. And it's a bit like, it's like a cross between a Mexican cantina and those Rousseau paint. Is it Rousseau who does those kind of those beautiful jungle scenes? It's a little bit like that. You have a tiny stage in the corner. It's got strips of glitter behind, which was left by some band. So it's got a kind of slight cabaret feel. It's a very odd space because you walk in and there's a bar to your right, and then the band is kind of around the corner. So it's like a weird sort of L shape, I suppose. And then it twists around, and then you've got the garden, and then you've got this area called the Jack Medley Room, which is the smoking shed, even though there's no smoking sign in there. And Jack Medley was this legendary party animal, a kind of, I think he called himself an anti-folk artist, basically a bit like Jeffrey Lewis, a guy with an acoustic guitar doing these crazy songs. It used to be his spot. He used to DJ in there. He died young, very sadly. And that is the area where you're going to find people like the Fat White Family hanging out, or, it's kind of, if you're going to be intimidated, that's probably the place to go. If you want to be intimidated, that's ideal.
Yeah.
I mean, they're actually very nice people, but it's that feels like the place which is the most of the scene, so to speak. And apart from that, it's just a kind of I mean, the clientele, like I said, is interesting. You still do get a few drinkers from the estate. You still get a few old Irish boys in there. You then you get, you know, the just gig goers. And then probably the most important figure we should talk about is the very scary looking dog on the roof. Now, the book is called Roof Dog for a reason. The famous dog was called Ben. He died, and he was a big Rottweiler, really, really scary, but also very sweet, nice when he got to know you. You know, and it's a classic old-fashioned council estate security. You know, you have a big scary dog and it scares away the burglars. And Ben was a very interesting dog because for two reasons. One, he was famously very, very flirtatious with women, where he would, you know, he would sort of this, you know, he'd go underneath wherever you know the women were sitting. He'd always go down to the stairs and he'd start going, you know, rather than like growling. And he also had a thing about, he really didn't like, this is a bit unfortunate, but he didn't like goths for some reason, especially if they're French. And there's a famous incident where everyone was outside at the front, and there's a bunch of French goths. It was a very sunny day and everyone was just having fun. And the French goths were taking themselves very seriously. They had all their layers of black and they're trying to be too cool for school. And then Ben relieved himself all over them as a way of showing his you know, his displeasure. So yeah, he was the one. They've always had a roof dog, and now it's got I think it's a is it Rottweiler? Lucky? No, German Shepherd. German Shepherd. So there've always been these big scary dogs, but generally, you know, because Seamus, who runs it, is actually a really nice guy, and Tim's really nice. So once you know, when you're inside and you see a big scary dog wandering around, it's actually going to be fine.
Yeah,
it's basically they're guard dogs, but they somehow seem to understand that when people are inside and it's all crowded, they're okay. There's been no incidents that I know of, apart from the urination.
I mean, that was a good and memorable incident.
Yeah, it was memorable.
Those kinds of venues, though, are increasingly threatened, aren't they? In across the UK, we're probably going to focus, I'm afraid, everybody largely on London, because I think those venues have been actually swept away in London at a far faster rate, as much as anything. I know that you and I have been talking about Emma Warren's book, Make Some Space, which is about total refreshment in East London. And Damaged Goods have a new book about London's lost music venues. So they've got the Marquee and the Roxy, the Falcon, Bull and Gate.
Clarendon.
Yeah, the Great Clarendon.
Correct.
Which are the ones that you miss the most? Obviously the Clarendon. And what did they give London's culture and the country's culture specifically, do you think?
So first answer to the first question, I missed the 12 Bar Club, which was on Downing Street, which I loved. I miss the Marquee when it was in Wardour Street. I used to go there. The 100 Club's still going, which is fantastic. I miss a little place called the Buffalo Bar. You must have gone there, Laura. That was great.
I used to DJ there, yeah.
Used to DJ there. There you go.
There we are.
I miss lots of places. There's a place called the George Robey, which was on Infinity Park, which I didn't miss that much. I didn't like it that much, actually, really. But I suppose it was quite important. And the Clarendon was my childhood place, which actually went years ago. I mean, that went, I think, even in my early 20s, it was gone. What they bring is, first of all, you know, you were saying earlier on that excitement that you have when you discover these places and you discover a new world. You know, it's a world that you're not going to find at home and you're not going to find it at school. It's even quite hard to find it at you know, on the record shop or whatever. It's something that belongs to not just the bands playing, but the people that go and the whole scene. I feel that the best of these places, first of all, they're run on passion. You know, there's no one sets up these places to make loads of money. They always have their own character. The good ones tend to get known for certain styles. You know, I think that's without, you know, or at least a certain aesthetic or a certain sense of taste. You know, I think the Windmill's done well. not because it sticks to any one style of music, but because Tim's always been very, very good at seeing what's going on in the underground, you know, whatever, however different that might be. And what they bring also, it's one of these things which is really hard to define, but I know it because I love the places so much. It's a kind of discovery, I think. It's a kind of freedom where you're not being prescribed. You know, it's like I said, much as I love places like the Barbican and you know, art centres, they're great, but that's different. You kind of know that they're already had the stamp of cultural approval. You know, what's
there's a
great
sort of cultural hierarchy to it, isn't there?
Yeah, but you know, to go and see some terrible band in, you know, some terrible oi band or something can be just as important as, I don't know, you know, going to see something which is considered great. You know, there's a kind of cultural hierarchy. There's a freedom in, you know, the possibility of being allowed to see Ned's Atomic Dustbin, or, you know, whoever they are. You know, there's an excitement there. It's like, you know, and I think it's definitely not just London. You know, it's everywhere. I mean, I remember after I met my wife, who's from Cornwall, we'd go down there and there's nothing going on there. And then for a while, there was this little pub in Falmouth called the Jacob's Ladder where people were putting on gigs. And you saw the effect it had so quickly because nothing was really happening. And it didn't take much for somebody enterprising to put on gigs at the Jacob's Ladder. And there's another place called Miss Peapod's, which is an even smaller place, which is called Penryn, a really small town. And suddenly you had all these quite weird, interesting American bands who were, you know, real underground bands, like a band called Sunburned Hand of the Man. I remember they played there. This is about 10 or 15 years ago. And, you know, it was interesting for them because they discovered a new part of Britain they wouldn't have otherwise gone to. And they played in front of 30 or 40 people. But for those 30 or 40 people, you think, how exciting is that? Do you know what I mean? And something didn't exist before. You're not going to find it under the official, you know, kind of, you know, sanctioned art centre. And it creates a scene. And, you know, scenes can be very, very important. It's not, you know, people think of scenes as something rather shallow, but it's not necessarily that. It's a place where you can, suddenly there are new ideas fermenting. And they never last forever. They never last that long. But, you know, you can feel really a part of things. So I think that's the importance.
Yeah. It's certainly where I live. I live down in Kent now, and that's been a really crucial part of I guess there's been an influx of people to this part of the world, to Margate and Ramsgate and whatever, but venues like the Music Hall in Ramsgate and elsewhere and Tom Thumb and wherever in Margate they've been the glue for lots and lots of people. And so many interesting people passing through and cross-pollinating. And I think cross-pollination is probably one of the big things for me in those venues because, you know, you are all queuing for one toilet and you are all hanging out in the smoking area and you get to have conversations that you've never before had in your life. Even at our age, you know, you still will meet interesting people who think differently to you. And it's not the same as going to even a slightly bigger venue. I think it's crucial that they are quite small and they're scruffy and, you know, and the people at the bar have their lives doing other things. Yeah.
Ramsgate Music Hall I've never been to, but I know that, I think you put on gigs there, didn't you?
Yeah.
You've been involved in it. So that is what I imagine is what I found when I went to these little things in Cornwall, is that suddenly you get all kinds of people because there's only so much going on, and people are curious and they'll come out. And so it may not be that they were fans of Jeffrey Lewis or whoever, I'm not sure who played at Ramsgate Music Hall, but you know what I mean? You know, but they think, well, this is interesting. Mm-hmm. And so suddenly you do get cross-pollination, you get all kinds of different people going to those things. And you realize, well, if you lose them, you know, especially in rural areas or smaller towns, you think, what's left? You know, we're going to be, you know, these are really important, I think. I think they kind of make things happen in and of themselves. I mean, the Windmill example I always think of is the Fat White Family. You know, that band by doing something unusual and interesting and challenging, it's kind of transgressive punk, I suppose you'd call it. They inspired so many bands in South London. And before them, there wasn't really a great deal going on. But you need that example, don't you? You know what I mean? And it's very, very hard when there's nothing. And these places are really easy. It's easy for them to fall down. And I think at the moment, it's particularly easy. And it's going to be really hard for a lot of these places to come back.
Oh, God,
but yeah, I mean, the only thing I'm hopeful for is that I'm old enough to remember the recession of the early 90s. I just left school. And it was actually, at that age, it's quite a good time because rent was so low. It was suddenly there's all kinds of things going on, people living in squats and stuff and putting on things. So once we're out of the coronavirus period, it's inevitable there's going to be a big recession. No one wants that. But at the same time, I'm thinking, well, maybe there will be some of that DIY spirit where you don't have to, things don't have to cost a fortune, but you do need imagination. Yeah. And you need to take a few risks. Maybe there'll be a little bit of return to that. I don't know.
We've already got a bit of a situation though, say in central London, in Soho, around there. There used to be so many of those little things. And now it's just Nando's and coffee shops to me. I can't, it's a very odd place to walk through if you knew it as it used to be, I guess. Do you think that there is a chance for cities to rebuild if we do go through a recession? Do you think there will be spaces still in the centre of a city, or is everything being pushed out?
Well, it's a little bit like, when I first went to New York, it was super exciting. And then when I went to, New York's always going to be exciting, but I remember last time I went, it was a couple of years ago, just felt so expensive. Do you know what I mean? It's like, how can places survive? So growth is not always a good thing. And I think maybe there could be, a big crash, which is inevitable. There could be a little return. I mean, Detroit was seen as a complete write-off after the collapse of the motor industry, and the centre was just, almost like a no-go area, and kind of, you'd hear these stories of buildings just, like the old City Hall being covered in vine and stuff. But there's been a bit of a development there with people setting things up and getting things going. So I don't know. I mean, it's very hard with Central London. Central London's been it's kind of been off limits for exciting things. And it's like when the 12 Bar went, which is not long ago, that was really sad, because that was, that was, for people who don't know, it's on Denmark Street. Denmark Street's full of these great guitar shops. And it was just an exciting little place to go to. So when that went, and you knew it's because they're developing the whole area, and it's turning into kind of semi-private space full of Jamie's Italian or whatever, or it was then, I think that's gone now. It's depressing, isn't it? It's, it strips places of character. So yeah, I mean, I think there could be. I mean, what I'm an optimist, and what I do feel is that, I was looking through London's lost music venues, this book, and thinking, my God, the Club of Mankind or whatever venue had long gone, the Crypt in Deptford, all these places. But places pop up. Oh, yeah. I mean, I live in Peckham, and Peckham has when we moved in, there was nothing going on there. Now there's quite a lot. So, places do pop up. People do get things going. I think people love live music. I think they really, really love it. I mean, look at the Renaissance in jazz. Who would bother in the days in the digital age to spend, hours and hours and hours perfecting your craft, learning to play incredibly complex music, which basically only exists live because it's improvised. That's its purest form, and you're playing, in front of a handful of people probably, and yet it's boomed. And I think it's because it's so expressive and exciting and culturally relevant. So
that happened at places like Total Refreshment Centre or the Church of Sound in Clapton.
That's exactly true.
Yeah,
exactly true. And again, I think those places helped inspire. I think you need spaces. You need physical spaces. One of the things that's happened. I mean, right now it's a joy to talk to you, Laura, but I'd rather see you. I'd rather have a drink. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like that with all my friends. I'm missing people. And I miss spaces. And I miss being with crowds and everything. I miss meeting new people. So I feel that those venues will actually have more of an importance after this, because we realise what we've been missing.
We have to keep this fairly short and sweet. as we all know, our online attentions spans are quite
limited.
Yes. Do you want to give us a little reading of a passage from the book?
Oh, okay.
Sorry, but I just thought it'd be nice.
Yes,
it would be nice for us
right.
to have a little taste of what the windmill's like and what we're all missing right now.
Okay, well, I'll just do the first page or two.
Brilliant. Yes.
Okay, here we go. So, at the back of the windmill, a flat-roofed pub at the top of Brixton Hill that for the past 2 decades has been an unlikely epicentre of Britain's underground music scene, is a shed-like space that was once intended as a green room. Generally known as the smoking shed or the Jack Medley room, this would-be artist quarters has a tendency to get filled each night with people who may or may not have something to do with whoever is performing on the little stage in the corner of the main room. The green room, stroke, smoking shed, stroke, Jack Medley room, backs out onto the windmill's garden where there's graffiti on the walls, an extremely dirty Cronenberg 1664 umbrella over a picnic table in the centre, and a rockery in the corner where the rocks are painted in sickly shades of blue and purple. Here and there are patches of greenery, even the odd flower. You cannot help but feel, though, that the flowers are fighting a losing battle. I'll leave it there.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, everybody. This is Will's book and Otto's book. Please invest in this. Will, I very much hope that I see you in a gig in a venue such as the Windmill very soon in real life.
I hope so too. And I'll just say, the Rough Trade Books put the book out. So if you go to Rough Trade Books, that's the place to get it.
Yeah, and they have many other glittering delights as well, don't they?
Yes, exactly. Still bookshops are closed. Hopefully they're opening soon, but in the meantime, you can get it from Rough Trade Books, the website.
Lovely. I will see you soon.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Bye.